This is a VW T5 camper van, and if you're unlucky enough to reverse out and catch the mirror and bend the actual fitting in there, this video is all about how to fix that fitting, undo the spring, where to get the parts from, and to get a working mirror again without having to buy the whole caboodle. This is a wing mirror motor from a VW transporter van, a 2010 VW transporter van, and it is almost impossible to find any information on how to fix this if you've done something stupid like reverse your van backwards and caught the wing mirror on a wall and ended up bending this bracket. The first thing to realise is that this outer casing here is actually just a push fit onto the bottom. Now the chance of you being able to push it off with your hands like this are almost zero. So if you want to get that casing off, what I would suggest is you use a cold chisel and bash along the bottom like that. Now these I-beams here are extremely useful for that purpose. You can probably go along to a builder's yard or some kind of metallurgy yard and pick up one of these for 10 quid or something like that. But if you're ever doing any welding, metal work, they're absolutely fantastic because they allow you to clamp things to that if you haven't got a workbench. So now that we've got the casing off here, let's have a closer look at it. You can see that it's only these screws through here that actually hold the casing onto the main motor. This comes off like so, and that black piece comes off the top of the motor. It's just a shield for the motor, and obviously the plug plugs in through there. I imagine the motor just has got a worm gear on it. Yes, it has, like so, and that just pulls straight out. So if you want to test the motor, you can just chop up a little paper clip and you can see that that motor works fine. Just bear in mind that this motor only works one way around. The positive is this terminal here and the negative is this terminal. And as I say, we've just chopped up a little paper clip. You can do that with a 9-volt battery. Obviously, you could also do it with a 12-volt battery or a car charger if you wanted to test the motor. And if you've got very good eyesight, you'll be able to see there's a tiny little number on that motor there if you ever need one. Now, to get that washer off, we have got to compress that spring with the washer and then tap the washer around, because I don't know how well you can see this, but these two tabs here, either side of there, have got to fall below the level of that, so we can tap it around underneath, and then there are gaps in this washer just there. See that hole just there? That's got to line up with that tab. The way we are going to try and compress that spring and at the same time rotate that washer is using a bearing press set here. Now we're just going to use one of the rods here, and the advantage of these rods is we can slot the rod through that wing mirror motor housing all the way through like we've done then, and then we can tighten this up to the end. And I'm just using a set of pliers because the pliers are slightly, or the pliers are thick enough so that when we tighten this here, it'll compress that spring, and I'll be able to rotate the pliers and rotate that washer at the same time, I'm hoping. I've just got a set of mole grips here to give me a little bit more width. You can see with this arrangement now, if I rotate this, okay, those two little tabs there are now below the level, and I should be able to rotate this round far enough so that tab there, the one in the middle, actually aligns with the hole in the washer, and that's my plan. We've now rotated those pliers so the notch on here is directly over the hole. Now, in theory, when we release this thing, the whole thing should spring apart, only it can't spring apart because it's held by these things, which will save us losing an eye. So let's see what happens. Fortunately, as I say, I've broken my camera stand. Those notches are now aligned with those holes, but the washer has not come flying off, and I suspect it's because it's tilted like that, and it's just the friction that's stopping it. So we're just going to see if we can compress this side of the spring slightly, and that should, in theory, come flying off. All we needed to do was just grab hold of that with a set of pliers, and there we go, we've got everything free. We just need to undo these knots now, and well, let's take that out and have a look at it. If you are ever taking anything to pieces, it's really important that you either film or take photographs, so you can see exactly how to put things back together. That comes off first. After you've taken the whole spring off, the next thing to do is to separate this plastic piece from here. Now just bear in mind that this base plate here is not symmetrical. It's got oval holes here, it's got a square hole here, so it's going to be very important how this fits through the hole. So make a very careful note before you take anything to pieces, the orientation of this base plate relative to this plastic plate and this gear. So we're just very carefully going to separate this now. Should just pull apart. Lifted that black plastic plate up slightly, you'll probably find that you can now lift this central section out. Now I'm just going to take that black piece off just so you can have a look inside there and see how that's made up. Inside there is just a worm gear. This is the worm gear here, and obviously the motor turns that, and that causes this to turn, which causes the mirror to turn. Now that at the moment is in the exact orientation that I took it out. It's the top piece coming out. The top piece is symmetrical. That central piece is not supposed to come out of there in one go. You have to separate these two cogs, this top one and the one underneath here, in order for those nodules to fit through. And the last piece that we're going to take off is this here. I don't think there's anything special about it. It's just a collar, a plastic collar, but just remember that the lip of that collar faces upwards. Just arrived in the post 3 weeks after ordering it is the unbent spare part. They both look exactly the same. All we've got to do first is put some grease on the new part and then see if we can reassemble the whole thing. First thing we need to do is put the collar on like so. Now just looking back at the disassembly video, this is not symmetrical here. It's got a square hole on this side, so I'm putting the square hole away from me, and when I place this over like so, the bottom part will fit on, hopefully, like that, and the top ring will have to just maneuver around like that. And I think that is exactly the orientation it was in when it came off. It's worth mentioning that this collar here has two cutouts. When you put that collar on, the small cutout houses that, and the larger cutout houses this big bit here. Now if you've got this bit on correctly, you'll find it rotates smoothly, like so. The next bit we need to do is just press this in there. Once you've pressed that plastic fitting in, next up you've got to slide this ring on. It only goes on one way. Make sure it's sitting flush, and then you're going to have the spring on. I don't think it matters which way around this spring goes, it looks pretty symmetrical. And then we just need to push that down and twist it to lock that in place, and then we're ready to put the motor in, and we could potentially test that with a battery before we lock everything down. The next stage is to get our bearing press. Now, if you don't have a bearing press, you could just use a bit of threaded rebar with some nuts on. As I mentioned before, the advantage of the bearing press is that the nuts it has are actually got bearings on them that makes them really easy to turn. And next up, you're going to put the spring on and this, and we need to wind this down sufficiently far so that we've got room to put a pair of pliers like that, because we're going to be twisting the pliers and trying to twist this around at the same time. It's really difficult to show this and do it at the same time because I need both hands and the camera stand's not really in the right position, but I'm just putting a set of mole grips between here and here and tightening that down a little bit and then twisting the mole grips, and that's twisting that washer around. We just need that washer around so that that little tab there is between these two notches. Once you've got the thing that far, you just need to get the mole grips around the outside of that washer and then twist it around until it locks in place. Once you've locked that tab between those two tabs, you should just be able to unscrew this and take that off. And that is now locked in place. And it's important that when you put the motor in, you put it in facing the right way, so the contacts here where the plug is going to plug in is actually lined up with that hole like so. Push the motor in, and in theory all you need to do now is put the top on and then just slide the cover on. We just put that back on, tested it, hit this. You can see that that worked perfectly. Up and down, and I think we can safely say that is job done. I'm going to leave it to the lovely owner of this fan to put everything back together. It's extremely easy to buy the wrong bracket if you've got an electric folding mirror. Okay, so take a very close look at the shape of these brackets. There's hundreds of cheap brackets for non-electric folding mirrors, but the electric folding mirrors brackets are different. If you're in the UK, they're almost always going to come from Turkey, and they're going to cost you about £20, including postage. And to find them on eBay, you want to be typing in Volkswagen T7 Transporter Caravel wing mirror bracket, and that will bring up these things here. Okay, I think we paid about I don't know, just over £20, including postage. But do be warned, you see these brackets here? They look very similar, but that is not the right bracket. You need the ones with the holes on the outside like that. I've mentioned that 6 times because it's so easy to buy the wrong bracket. Now, incidentally, you can also buy the whole unit, £174 here. That is the whole unit. If you can't be bothered to fix your own, but you can see that's £174 plus postage, that they are not cheap. Those bearing press kits will cost you anywhere between, I don't know, £50 and £70 on eBay. And if you just use it for that one job, you would always be able to sell that kit secondhand because there's always a ready market for them. But just buying one of those kits and the bracket is still cheaper than buying a brand new motor.